Okay, our first video today is on rational numbers. So what are rational numbers? Rational numbers are what we call fractions. A rational number is any number which can be written as a fraction. That means it can be written with a numerator and a denominator. So the numerator you can see over here is our number that's on the top, and our denominator is the number that's on the bottom. It might help to remember it by thinking denominator is down. Here are some examples of different rational numbers. Our first one is what we call a proper fraction, and that's 2/5. Our second one is 7/3, and that's what we call an improper fraction because it's more than a whole. 3 1/4 is what we call a mixed number. And 6 is also a rational number because it's worth 6 wholes. So we can say that 6 is equal to 6/1 or just 6 ones. An example of a number which is not a rational number is the square root of 7, because the answer to this cannot be written as a fraction. So, does this mean all roots of numbers are irrational? What about the square root of 36? You know that the square root of 36 is 6, and we can write 6 as 6/1. So this means that any number that's a perfect square is rational. So not all roots of numbers are irrational. Some rational numbers may look quite different, but they may actually represent the same value. Here we have 2/8. If we multiply 2/8 by 2, we get 4/16, which is actually the same value. If we multiply 2/8 by 3, we get 6/24, which is still the same value as 2/8. And the last one, if we divide 2/8 by 2, we get 1/4, which is still the same value as 2/8. All of the fractions above are equal, so the name that we give them is equivalent fractions. To make an equivalent fraction, we just multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So here we are starting with 2/5, and if we multiply the numerator and the denominator by 2, we get an equivalent fraction which is 4/10. If we multiply it by 3, we get an equivalent fraction which is 6/15. And the last one, if we multiply them by 4, the numerator and the denominator, we get 8/20. So these are all equivalent fractions to 2/5. To compare fractions means to work out which one is bigger. We can use symbols like less than or greater than to help us compare. So, for example, we could compare 2/3 with 4/5. It's a bit hard to compare 2/3 with 4/5, so what we want to do is to find some equivalent fractions that will have the same denominator, so it's easier to figure out which fraction is bigger. So if we're looking at our two denominators at the moment, we have 3 and we have 5. What we need to do to figure out what our common denominator will be is to find the lowest common multiple of 3 and 5, which is 15. So now we want to be changing both of our fractions to have that denominator. So to change the denominator of 3 to 15, we're going to multiply by 5. We need to do the same to the numerator to create our equivalent fraction. So now we have 10/15. To our second fraction, we also want to make the denominator 15, so we're going to multiply our second fraction, the numerator and the denominator, by 3, which will give us a fraction of 12/15. Now that our two fractions have the same denominator, it's a lot easier to compare them. Clearly 12/15 is going to be bigger than 10/15, so we want to put our less than or greater than sign in so that it points to the smallest fraction and opens out to the bigger fraction. So now we can read 2/3 is less than 4/5. A good way to think about the less than sign is to think of it as an L for less than. And that's the end of our video on rational numbers.